All right. Hello,
Hey,
guys, and welcome back to Gabbin with Jessa. You are here on my channel, but we are here with the wonderful members of the Interstellar Book Club. You know them, you love them, but I'm going to give them the chance to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Steph, right over there.
Hi guys, my name's Steph from the channel Coffee Over Apples. I read lots of horror and obviously sci-fi and fantasy and thrillers. I do a bookmark when I love a book and I rant while cooking when I hate a book, and both of those things will be coming out very shortly, one of them next week. But yeah, that's me, and let's go to Max.
hey, I'm Max from Max Reads. I do single book reviews and I read everything.
Hi, I'm Melody. I'm from Strawberry Lemon Books, and I like doing vlogs.
All right. And if you're on my channel, you already know what I do. So let's just jump into it. This month, we were actually very blessed to be given the book, The Dark That Dwells by Digman and Roddy. They sent it to us. They're an author duo. They also have their own YouTube channel. They're a married couple. They're amazing. They're like pediatric surgeons in Alabama. So the fact that they had time to even write a book, it just blows my mind. And they were very nice. They reached out to us and each gave us a copy. And so we obviously wanted to do a review on it because it fits perfectly with our book club. And that is what we read this month. We'll start with non-spoilers, just general review on the book, and then we'll hop into a spoiler section. So if you haven't read the book, you'll know when to clock out of here. So does anyone want to start?
Should we give a plot rundown first?
Yes.
Good idea.
Vaguely.
Would you like to do that?
I can do. I can look at my notes. I've written a little plot recap for my review. Hold on.
I had something up here too.
Okay, I'm going to monologue now. Is that okay?
Go for
Yes.
it.
Okay. This book is set in another galaxy, presumably tens of thousands of years in the future after the rise and fall of countless cultures and worlds. Where we are now, though, is a universe fractured into two rival nations, Rune and Lydia, their trade and interactions moderated by the much smaller nation of Valen. All human and officially ruled worlds exist in the Fathom, a sort of galactic core surrounded by small, lawless frontier worlds, pushing into the uncharted darkness of space beyond, known as the Pelagos.
Perfect.
Scroll down.
All right. So, me personally, for my star review, I haven't updated it yet because I just finished, but I'm giving this 3 out of 5 stars, which I know some booktubers say that means it's absolutely like horrible that it's 3 out of 5 stars. That is totally not how I judge it personally. I enjoyed it, but there were also aspects I didn't like. Very average book for me. 3 stars, 3 out of 5. So.
Yeah, the way, I don't know, I'm pretty sure everyone here might rate it very similarly, but the way that ratings kind of work is like 1 is I hated it. 2 is it's bad, but it's not the worst thing I've ever read. Or 3 is middle of the road, could be bad, could be good. 4 is this was great, but not an all-time favorite. And 5 is like, I'm going to not stop talking about this till the end of time.
So was it 3 stars for you as well?
It was 3 for me. Yeah.
It's a 2 for me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's a 2 for me.
It's a 3 for me.
I said 3.5.
3.5.
All right.
I also finished it today, though. So
Goodreads needs to start letting us do half stars.
Yes,
That needs
please.
to be
That
a
would be
thing.
the
Yes.
best thing.
Please. Speaking
Or
of
just
which,
let us 3 out of 10.
I just started a Storygraph. I don't know if you guys have joined Storygraph, but I'm doing it alongside Goodreads. They give you half stars. And they also, it's really great because they give you statistics based on your genre of reading.
Ooh.
And you can also link it to your Goodreads so you don't have to update anything. You just port it over.
Ooh.
You said that like a paid sponsorship.
Because it's like, it's just amazing.
That is like, sponsor me.
Yes, please. That and Skillshare, we'll take it.
Okay. Does anyone want to start with why they gave it the rating that they did?
Okay. Can I start?
Yes.
So it wasn't a bad time. It felt like 2 things to me. It felt like I can tell this was a debut author, which is fine because it was, but also I think with the experience that we have as sci-fi readers, my bar is kind of like up here. And so a couple things that I feel like I'm used to reading in more flushed out, and more authors who have a bit more of a track record. This was kind of like, oh, I can tell that this is the first. I can tell that this is the debut novel. For example, there were some really, really good ideas, but there were some ideas that I just wanted to be flushed out more and maybe weren't touched on at all. And so that was like lacking for me. I actually ended up reading this twice because the first time I was confused and I had information and I went back and I was like, oh, now it makes sense. Yes.
I think one thing that's going to put a lot of people off this book is that there is a heck of a lot of terminology thrown in, like bang in your face from page one, like waves and waves of names you don't get an explanation for until like hundreds of pages later. And I feel like you have to go into this book committed, but like, so you have to be along for the ride, just sort of taking everything with the understanding that you'll get it later, but also like 110% switched on because nothing is recapped or mentioned again.
Right.
So you have to hold all this information the whole way through the book. And I feel like I was thinking about this, and my partner actually brought it up, that if this book had a glossary, it would have been twice as easy to read.
Yes.
And the element that made it an exhausting read would just be gone. Like
so
if they had like a little list of terms at the back, I would have given it another star if it had a glossary, I reckon.
So hopefully in book 2 they incorporate that.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed it from the beginning. I was like kind of hooked into it, still a little confused because, you know, there's still a lot of characters. I feel like this is definitely character driven just because of the different characters that we get. So I was like, I don't know what about it, but I was like, I guess I was just excited and ready. And I was like, okay, cool. Like I'm getting this. It's going to be fun. And I had a good time at the beginning. And then towards like the middle-ish, things started getting a little more confusing. Again, I think now that you mention it, like they never really go back and explain anything. So I think that's probably why that I was starting to get confused, which is why I gave it 3 stars, just because I had a fun time. I was ready for it, but then just started getting a little confusing, a little clunky, but I still enjoyed what they were going for.
Yeah, same. I feel like I like flipped back throughout the book to be like, I remember they mentioned this, but I don't remember what it is. So I flipped back to like look for it. But I liked all the action and everything. And it was like all the fighting was so good. And yeah.
I actually took some notes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go on. Go ahead.
I was just going to add to that, like saying, because I was like I annotated the crap out of this, but like I had notes in the back similar to what we were just saying, which is like I think the VIA, or I don't know how to say some of these terms, but the one thing that Cydia had to like boost the lightning and everything, that wasn't introduced until I think like 150 pages in. So she had already been using it for most of the book, but we didn't get an explanation until like a good almost halfway. So at that point I was like, oh, okay, what I thought I was imagining it as in my head was incorrect. So now I need to go back and reread it the correct way now that I understand what that was. And that happened a couple times with a couple different things.
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to say the one thing I was talking to Steph about in the chat was that I feel like this has a very franchise feel to it. Like this feels like a novel of a video game series or a novel spin-off of a TV series because of the amount of terms they hand you, that it feels like you're supposed to already know. And I was reading this and I was like, if Matt Digman and Ryan Roddy got a contract to do like spin-off novels for something, they would nail it.
I agree.
Like 100%, they would nail it. They have exactly that vibe.
There was just so many, like, I could tell the inspiration that they got from, and I was also really fascinated just with, like, I didn't know this was also going to be fantasy as well, because it was kind of like, it gave me, you know, sci-fi fantasy feels to it, so you could tell, I could, you know, realize, like, the Lord of the Rings that they could have in there, the references, or just inspirations from there, and then, like, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, too, which is 2 things you never really would, like, put together, just because they're so different, but I could like feel very many like fantasy vibes from typical fantasy, and then like the sci-fi aspects from very typical sci-fi.
Yeah. The influences that I was getting were I was noticing things that were making me think of different video games the whole way through.
Mhm.
Like I saw a lot where I was like, that smells like Halo, and a lot where I was like, that really it feels with the guy Tiga, what's his name, the big judge guy. He really felt like one of the judges from like a Final Fantasy game or something like that.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I could see
So
that.
I was getting like, but in the back, in Matt's description of an author, it says he plays loads of RPG video games.
Mm-hmm.
So like you know where it's come from.
I felt that in the beginning with Fall when he was like when he would trigger his different kinds of arrows and he would have to say like killer or whatever the case is, like when you're in an RPG and you're running around, like you're trying to run around to gain enough time to switch your weapons while the boss is following you, and it's kind of like you're switching through the weapons and it's going killer, boomer, tangerang, like whatever, and you're just like, oh, I'm trying to get to the right weapon. That's what that felt like.
I love that the word boomer was in this book because like it means something completely different as well.
And I love that. Yeah, like I feel like this is like kind of like Ready Player One in the way of where you can notice all the different references, but like it's not specifically like this is Star Wars or something like that. So a little bit of Ready Player One, just like with the inspiration, so you can see from a lot of different areas of pop culture and things like that.
I was not prepared for the heavy fantasy, though, I have to say. Like from the description, I really thought that this was going to be like a hard sci-fi. And when I'd say like halfway through, it got very fantasy heavy. It was kind of a shock for me. I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but I wasn't mentally prepared for having to envision all the worlds. Even though in the beginning we did have some description of what the Never was, which I thought was really cool, and I want to get into that later. But I thought that was like where it was going to cap off with the fantasy element, and it just went deep dive into fantasy from there. So totally unexpected.
I was kind of thinking about that though, with the whole fantasy, with the whole magic as technology so far advanced you don't understand what it is, so it's basically magic, like in Thor, right, where they say it's science but you wouldn't get it, it's just magic to you kind of thing. But I feel like if you go far enough in the future, if you set any sci-fi far enough in the future, would it all be that? Would there be an aspect of that in everything?
I don't think so. That's one of the qualms that I had with it, though.
Because I'm not sure. Because like I don't know.
Yeah, no, because at a certain point, it's like we know that they've gotten so far from Earth that they could be in a totally different galaxy even.
They are in a different galaxy.
Yeah, and so they've had to recreate this technology or had to manufacture it at a mass scale somehow. But how are we doing that if it's like it's so beyond us, we don't even understand it yet? So like, are you using the same ships from 10,000 years ago? Or how I needed some more structure to that. That was one thing that just wasn't working for me.
Is there anything else anyone wants to talk about before we get into a spoiler section?
Oh, sorry. I felt like we were already in spoilers.
I don't really. Like kind of, I don't know.
I don't think we gave anything away.
What else?
Nothing. Nothing to.
Oh, nothing plot-wise.
Yeah, nothing
plot-wise.
Exactly.
Just like little structure world building things.
Yeah.
I think the only,
if anything, is beneficial. So
it is beneficial. You're right.
Okay,
I think the only
we'll hop
thing.
into spoilers now, just to save us from any accidental slips that I know I'll probably do too. But
just in case.
Yep. All right.
If anyone in the chat read it, please let us know what you think. I know I see Natalie is there, but I'm pretty sure she said in the Discord that she didn't read it, so that's totally fine. If you didn't read it, it's cool.
That's fine.
I have one spoiler-free bit that I can say just before we like chop our own heads off. So I think that I know we've just gone through stuff we didn't like about the book or stuff that didn't hit quite right about the book, but one thing for me where I can honestly say I think the authors really, really shine is fight scene choreography.
Yeah.
I think all of that was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the way that they kept the pacing in the fight scenes was really, really good. Like every single fight scene, I was like hooked in.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of the book, I was like, just give me the next fight scene.
Yeah. Those are my favorite parts.
Okay. That's just spoilers.
All right, spoilers. So, is there anything major anyone wants to start off with?
Yes, I have a plot hole.
Oh, okay.
So, in the beginning, when they go into the Never for the first time, they say that the Never only exists when you go into it.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, how are the others like hiding in there? So, they've erected like a base in the Never, and is that like keeping it in existence?
Well, Tiger, I don't know if I'm saying his name right.
Yeah.
He has he has portal abilities that I
Mhm.
just didn't understand. So I was assuming that had something to do with it.
Maybe, I don't know. With
That-
the Never as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that this idea of like subspace is such a common sci-fi trope.
Mhm.
It's a really common sci-fi trope, and choosing to call it the Never was interesting because in China Mieville's Embassy Town, which is one of my favorite books, also has subspace. It's called the Always.
Oh,
So I was like,
is that intentional?
I don't know.
Interesting.
Was that an accident?
So, and considering that there were these little creatures, which I thought was an interesting idea. I forgot what they were called, but like those almost like fish.
Irini,
Yeah,
I
that would
think
like
they were
follow
called.
the ships that would come out of the Never.
Yeah.
So, like, what do we mean when we say that it doesn't exist? Like, if you, unless you interact with it by entering it, that it's not visible. But then, how does everyone know that it's there?
Right.
And the way that I was kind of imagining it was like, okay, so in space we have no sense of direction, right, of orientation, but assuming that there's this vast like edge of the universe where we can't go in unless we have the right technology, then technically would that be the floor? So I just assumed everybody was coasting.
I think we go between the universe and the floor. So I was picturing it like, the universe, you drop out of that into the Never, and underneath it you have the layer that the Irini pop out of, like the ocean. But I really don't know.
That makes sense to me. I was also very confused by it, but I think I just kind of put it out of my head that I'm like, oh, I'll get back to that later. I'll try to figure it out later.
Yeah. But I'm sad we didn't get more explanation of what the Never was.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly why I like put it out of my head, because I'm like, they'll come back to it. They'll like, we'll figure it out, and then I forgot.
Yeah.
It wasn't brought up again. Maybe in book 2 it'll be brought up again. I hope. I really hope.
It could be.
Are they continuing this as a series?
I think they are.
It is a series, yeah.
Yeah. So that's good.
To me, it smells like book 1 of a trilogy.
Which is why, I don't know, like, maybe this wasn't for me, or we didn't rate it as high because we're heavy sci-fi readers. But for someone who might be new to sci-fi and is familiar with fantasy, maybe this could be an entryway to sci-fi for them.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because there is like the sci-fi or the fantasy elements to it, which like, I mean, I love fantasy too, but I'm more of in the realm of like Harry Potter fantasy. I'm still trying to branch into like other kind, like actual hard and high fantasy. And so I think that's what threw me off a little bit, but I feel like it seems like people always like categorize like sci-fi fantasy like together. Like it's always like, that's like the genre is like sci-fi fantasy. And I'm like, I feel like those are two like completely different things. But the fact that they could bring these together and possibly attract those both kinds of people, or introduced maybe fantasy lovers into sci-fi and vice versa, I think that it definitely made it interesting for me, seeing like those higher fantasy elements to it.
Yeah, definitely. It was like, I kept thinking to myself, this is soft sci-fi that reads like hard sci-fi. They were like, the language that it was using and the amount of jargon in there, I would expect from like really hard sci-fi like Jerry Pournelle and Larry Niven kind of thing. But then like with the magic, but also there not being like a hard magic system.
Mhm.
Right.
But I don't know. It
Because
was like the genre, it was confusing. It was really confusing.
And that's because we didn't really know the magic system until like the very end. Because again, with the not learning terminology until it was explained like later on, which there were a couple points within the book where I literally highlighted and said, if this had been in the beginning, I would have had enough information to enjoy everything up until this point.
Yeah,
so just like taking some scenes and flipping them around would have bumped this up significantly.
Yeah.
What about you, Mel? What's your favorite scene or character?
My favorite character is Hermes.
Really?
Favorite. He's the best. I love him.
Okay, speaking of Hermes, did anyone else give him a weird voice in your head?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Who did you cast in your head?
I casted the guy from Goodfellas. It was oh my God, what's his name? I was literally thinking about it yesterday. Wait. The guy who goes, do I look like a clown to you? You think this is funny? Who's the mafia guy from all the movies? Oh my God, wait. Who did you guys cast him as?
Oh, for me, it was 100% Danny DeVito.
Danny DeVito? I could see that. I could see that. Oh my God, what is his name? I can't. It's a short guy. Not as short as Danny DeVito, but...
Or like Gilbert Gottfried.
Oh my gosh, yes. Iago from Aladdin.
But yes, Hermes was my favorite.
There was a really confusing bit with Hermes where he was also the old man.
Yeah.
I was like totally lost with that.
Wait, he was also the old man.
The old man inside the crystal was called Hermes. And I was like, is this the same Hermes?
Oh,
it is the same.
Yeah.
Or is it just the name of like a program? Kind of.
No,
I really wasn't sure.
He told the Hermes and the crystal told Fall about how it wasn't their fault that the ship attacked or whatever. So it was the same Hermes. I just didn't get how he got into the crystal.
But the outside Hermes asked for what happened in the crystal.
He did?
I thought the outside Hermes asked what happened inside the other crystal.
Oh, okay.
I'm confused.
Yeah, me too.
I need to reread this again then. Because I'm like, wait.
Because there was a crystal that somebody else went into.
Can we talk for a second about shapeshifters and conservation of mass? If we're doing
I knew that was going to come up.
If you weren't going to say it, I was.
Joe Pesci! Sorry. Sorry, it just hit like... Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I can see that.
Joe
Pesci.
Yeah, it's one of my pet hates in fantasy and sci-fi. Like when you shapeshift, where are all those extra kilos coming from?
When he turned into the bear?
Yeah, when he was like this big, then turned into a bear, like ripped the side of a spaceship, and then was like this big again.
See, if the can, when he shrunk down, suddenly became extremely heavy.
Right, if it was like super dense.
Yeah, then and nobody could like pick it up and put it in their pocket because it was just this solid core of mass, that would make sense. But instead he expanded, so if he expanded to a bear, wouldn't he be like mostly air or something? How is he so powerful?
Just pull the bear apart.
But I really liked that scene. I'd say one of my favorite scenes was the action scene where they were fighting those bug scorpion things.
Oh yeah.
That was really cool.
Those are creepy.
I don't know if I would have made it.
Yeah, no.
But I honestly thought Fall was gonna die, and I was so excited. I was ready for it. I was like, oh man, we have a main cast death within the first 100 pages. Yes, and then he survived.
That would have been a brave move.
I was surprised that none of the main people died.
Yeah, I was ready for Ban to die at the end. I thought he was gonna like sacrifice himself or something.
Murder.
I could see that.
Like become a champion of a god and like immediately martyr himself. I think that would have been really cool.
pull a Kelsey? I'm sorry, I'm a misformed. But anyway.
I think my all-time, like, my favorite bit in the whole thing was only like 2 paragraphs, and if they had expanded it to like a full couple of pages, then I would have been like, my eyes would have been on fire. It was the bit where the Forge, the ship, ambushed the lantern in the Never. Like, it came out of the underneath, like right behind it, and it says like the bone spikes coming into the Never. I was like, oh, like, why didn't we get more of that?
Okay, so that is another qualm that I have with this, and I hope that they expand more on in the future, is even though it was very cool, the outfit descriptions, this is great. Again, like choosing, like, you're making your avatar for an RPG. Fantastic, right? But I would wanted that same level of description with the world.
Yeah.
And that was what was lacking for me.
I think because it was so character driven, that's kind of why they focused on that creating your avatar aspect. I like that terminology for it. And I agree as well, just because I'm a person who needs a lot of description. I need you to like tell me like the sky is blue for me to actually like believe it, just because I have a harder time visualizing more things, because I'm definitely more of like a words person than like a description. Like, I need you to tell me like 2 + 2 = 4. So I need you to like, maybe not exactly like that basic, but it's just hard for me to imagine more things, especially when it's a little bit higher of like, it was soft sci-fi, but like higher fantasy. And because I wasn't expecting that, I'm like, okay, I need a little more to just help me out, because I was not expecting this. So
for me, I feel like I care more about what the world looks like than I care about what they're wearing as much, because if you tell me they're wearing like a certain thing, I can usually imagine like my own colors and stuff. But the world,
They clearly had such a strong image in their head when they wrote this. Like,
I
they
wonder if they have sketches.
knew what everything was going to look like.
That was a suggestion that I had written in my notes, is like, I feel like this book would have benefited from, yes, a glossary, but also some character art, or some like maybe like blueprints of ships, or like,
oh yeah, that would have been cool.
Yeah, you know, just some kind of what's it called? What's the terminology for it? When you just have artwork throughout, or either in the beginning or the back of the book,
right,
or something, or even a map of the solar system that we were in, or like a map of the chunk of the universe that we were focusing on.
With the map of the solar system, that's such a good suggestion, because when they were talking about like the different factions, I was having such a hard time keeping track of who was in what faction, because there was like the Runians and the Illidians were the main 2. But then all they kept talking about again and again and again were the Elcosians. And it's like, I kept having to be like, oh yeah, that's just a religious sect. That's not like an affiliated with either nation sort of thing. But yeah, it was hard to keep track of who was who.
Yeah. So like a graphic organizer or something to help us keep track of what territory is being conquered by which group.
Yeah.
And even if you don't want to put that like in the book, because I can see it, you know, taking up pages or anything like that, maybe just another resource online. I mean, that's a thing now. Like people, I go online to like, you know, all the fandom wikis if I'm looking for something like Marvel related or Harry Potter, because those are like so good. So even if they had those on like their own website or something, just to help out as well.
Yeah. Recently, last year, one of my favorite books was Monster by Duncan Swan, and that was something that he did, was it's concept art. He put out the concept art. It wasn't in the book, but he put the concept art on his website and on his Twitter and was referring people to it. So like before we got into the book, we had a visualization of what these monsters look like, and it kind of set you up for, oh, shit's about to go down. Like, you know, like give us that hype, and it would have benefited from it.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes authors, not just them, just like in general, sometimes when you're creating a new world and it's not just us boring people here. You actually have like fun things. It's sometimes harder for people to visualize. Like there was this other book. I don't know if any of you guys watching Practical Jokers.
Yeah.
But one of the Jokers wrote a book, and it's like kind of like a horror series kind of thing. It's pretty decent. But like the creatures that are in there, like I just can't visualize them. I just keep thinking of like the Demodog things from like Stranger Things. But like if I had more visual things, I feel like I'd be into the books more. And I feel like again, that's just like the first one that always pops in my head when I'm like, I can't picture what you were trying to like explain to me. And so I think just in general, if there was just like, it doesn't need to be in the book. Like every author probably has a website of some sort, maybe not specifically for the book, but at least for them. And so just putting that out there and helping people in general.
Yeah. And taking, instead of having those paragraphs where we're describing the characters and what they're wearing, having that in the concept art on their website or something else, then those paragraphs could have been used towards the world building instead, and it wouldn't have expanded, like made the book.
And you can just put like in the front of the book or at the end of the book or something. Please visit thedarkthatdwells.com for a better visual explanation on things.
I feel like I have to, with stuff like this, almost rein myself in, because I have, with every book I read, I have a lot of critique of stuff that I read and how it could have been laid out better. And it's cool, like giving advice to people, but at the same time, I'm like, this is published, it's out, like it's done.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, actually, that's a good point that you bring that up, because I didn't even realize till after we were doing this that it was April's independent publishing month, and these guys are independently published, right? So, I mean, considering that it is an independently published book, I can I think that a lot of this feedback is something like they can really take into consideration, assuming that they're going to be doing independent publishing again for the second book. And things that, like, when you don't have that huge publishing house behind you, that like these suggestions would come through it, because it's very much like, you know, they are the entire process. But still, for a self-published book, I like what it has the potential to do, and I really like the cover art.
I love the cover.
I love the cover. The cover is
so
great.
pretty.
What were your favorite characters?
Yes. I liked Ban. I don't know why. I was just a fan. Like I was those sections with Ban in it were like my favorite to read. Were just, I guess, the best for me to understand. So yes, so aesthetic. Yes.
I really liked Sostek. I was like, finally an alien.
I guess
they were all humans, right? In my mind, I was imagining them as like normal humans.
Almost everyone was a human except for Sostek and Hermes, right? Yeah. Okay, speaking of humans, there is one thing that did ruffle my feathers a little bit. I don't know if anyone else, or maybe it's just me, but considering that this is 10,000 years in the future, I think it's 10,000, right, or some number of years in the future. There was a scene. I think, who was first being introduced? Was it Sidnia? I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly. But the two, her and the other flight attendant.
Ronan, I think.
No, or what is the other? Is it Mia? I can't remember.
May,
right. When they were first introduced, they were introduced as having Asian features, but were also referred to as exotic. And that bothered me a little bit, because if we're in the future, by saying that they're exotic, does that mean that everyone is fitting a certain like demographic? Is everyone
our planet's like racially segregated?
Our planet's racially segregated. Like,
I didn't even pick up on that. That's good.
What does exotic mean? Because the person, I don't know if it was Fall or if it was the narrator or if it was Fall. It might have been Fall who was saying that. But I'm like, okay, but but by what standard are
Mhm.
we calling them exotic? Because we don't know what anyone else looks like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was just a little thing for me I didn't like. But.
Mhm.
I didn't even notice that, but that's a really good
picked
point.
up on it. I saw the word exotic and I was like, what?
Like we're in the future. Everyone's
Yeah, when I think of future, I just think of like, like blue people. Like, so like exotic could literally mean like anything.
Like I would have.
Sostek is exotic.
Is exotic, right?
Yes.
Hermes is exotic.
Mhm.
That makes perfect sense. But yeah, that was like ooh, red flag. But again, that's part of like we're building this world, and I was like, okay, just see where it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not like Olivia though.
Oh, do you know who she
That's
reminded me of?
right?
She reminded me of Hawkeye from FMA. I was just picturing her as Hawkeye. But like retrospectively, I'm like Hawkeye is way cooler, so I don't know why I have that image in my head.
Why? Wait, hold on, I'm looking it up. I haven't seen that in so long.
You know
From
the
Fullmetal
blonde
Alchemist, right?
woman that hangs out with Mustang.
Oh, yes, I can totally see that. But yeah, no, I wanted Fall to die. It's like,
I wanted one thing to like pull some emotion out of my face. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes you read a book and you're like, okay, I want this to like hit me eventually.
Mhm.
That's why I was expecting a character to die.
Yeah.
There were a lot of characters dying though. There was some gore, there was action. It was high stakes for anyone who was not a main character.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Which I mean, for me at least, in order to feel high stakes, I have to be invested in some of the main characters.
Yeah.
And because that investment wasn't there, it didn't feel high stakes. But everyone else was dying, which was why in the Discord I was like, "Wow, everyone's dying! Yay!" Like, great.
I thought Hermes was gonna die, and I was like, "Oh no!"
Everyone had like plot armor.
Great. Actually, the one of my favorite scenes was, and I can tell, who was it? I think it was Fall was being tortured. Yes, kill your protagonists. Yes, please.
Good people die too.
Yes,
Murder everyone.
they do. The scene where Fall was being tortured, I think towards the end, and they were like pumping fluid into his lungs to make him feel like he's drowning. That was
You can tell
great.
it's written by doctors.
Yes, I can tell that they were physicians. It was fantastic. I wanted more of that. Like, I loved that scene.
Mhm.
That felt high stakes to me.
It just brings it in more because you understand, like, when you get their background and things, it just makes it that much better. And yeah, I just like, I love that. Like, you could just feel them in there in that moment. And that's what I felt like. So,
Like, if we would have had more explanation as to like torture systems, because I really suck at these names. So if someone can help me out, but was it the Ecos, the super religious sect that Tiger was a part of? If they would have, because they felt very medieval, considering that this is set very much in the future. So if we would have had some sort of like explanation as to like their torture systems, because that seemed to be their favorite pastime, favorite hobby, that would have been really, really interesting. Because that was a very interesting form of torture that I didn't even think of. I thought they were going to do like waterboarding.
Never seen that.
Yeah, it was like extreme internal waterboarding. It was great.
This we find out like 2 years down the line that Matt and Ryan are both serial killers.
They're too nice. I don't think that's gonna happen.
wasn't that kind of like, I've only seen The Princess Bride once. Because isn't there a scene kind of similar to that? Except don't they suck the water out of him? Unless this is just my childhood memory, like not being right.
I've never seen The Princess Bride, so I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I feel like it reminded me of that, but again, that scene terrified me as a child, and so I don't know if it's actually that movie or not, but that's what it reminded me of too. And I was
Isn't
like,
that a sweet romance movie? Am I thinking of the wrong movie?
I have no idea. I
There's
know it's like a
waterboarding?
comedy,
Romance
I
elements.
think.
Oh, okay.
It's like a comedy fantasy.
Yeah, but then there was like that scene, so I don't know if my memory's just confusing the two different. I don't know. Either way, it reminded me of that scene from wherever I'm thinking of. So,
Can we talk about the religious aspect of our villain?
Yeah.
There
I
were
have
some
a couple of things to say as well.
yeah, it wasn't working for me. It felt a little inconsistent to me because his mode. Well, there's two things. One, he has this obsession with killing the witches, as he calls them, right? Which was one of our protagonists, and then he hinted to something that happened in his childhood with a sister, which I didn't fully understand, but I guess was the trigger for that. But aside, putting that to the side for a second, focusing on his obsession with his religion, and just being an extremist. And then when his leaders give him orders, I couldn't wrap my head around how someone who was so deep into the religion was so willing to disregard direct orders from the heads of the organization.
In training for that religion, you would have had hierarchy beaten into you, and that would be such a part of who you were. Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like sometimes with like religious zealotry as a motive, sometimes I'm like, it seems like a very, very, very simple motive. And that I feel like he was probably the only character that I couldn't see any complexity behind. He was very two-dimensional. The others like had a past, had a history. I especially love like the flashback dream sequences they all had that were thrown in. But yeah, he was very 2D.
That's definitely one of the parts where it felt like clunky to me too, because especially if he is not like the high power, like why would you just like not listen to the higher power or whatever? Like, so that's where it got clunky for me as well.
Yeah. I'm taking a religion class this semester, so I was like, I don't know about this.
Did anybody pick up on what he was referred to as by the head of the order? But they called him the Malleus Maleficarum.
Oh, I highlighted that somewhere. And
do you know what it means?
No.
It's Latin. It means the witch hammer, and it's the name of a book written in the 1600s by Matthew Hopkins, who is the head witch hunter in the UK.
Oh, look at all these references.
Damn.
Very nice.
Folklore histories.
Yes.
That's so fascinating, huh?
See, I love that. So this is like the second time during this live show that you brought up some sort of reference to some other literature. And like that would have been something that would have been interesting to be played up more, of how we're set in this futuristic timeline, but there's still all these connections to like the original Earth, or where humans originated from, an original
even with the name Hermes.
Yeah. Like play that up more as part of the plot.
Right. Instead of just kind of using it for a one-time thing, especially like now that I know that it's actually like related to something like from the 1600s, and we're like in, I don't know, like 12,000 years in the future or whatever it is, whatever year we would be in. Like that would be really interesting, just to draw those parallels between, hey, just because we're in the future and we have all this technology and fun things like that, doesn't mean that we've strayed too far from the 1600s. So,
but then there was the. Sorry, Steph. Go on.
Oh no, I was just saying we're still humans, you know.
Yeah.
We are.
Yeah.
But I feel like on the other side of that coin, one of the big themes of the book was like forgetting your past, forgetting your heritage, and like the complete erasure of civilizations. So I think that sometimes having a little carryover that we would know the reference to, but the characters wouldn't understand where it came from, would make sense. But I think, yeah, you're right. Definitely throw those things in, but throw them in for us
Mm-hmm.
Don't throw them in for like the characters.
Right.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense.
So you could argue either way, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I have to admit the heavy fantasy section in which Ban goes through the trials and gets the power and finds the dark that was dwelling, right? As cool as that was, I was highly confused.
Yeah.
For most of it. And I can't tell you why I was confused. I don't know. I just was confused. So if anyone can elaborate, if anyone else was confused, or anyone can elaborate what happened there, we appreciate it.
No, I can't.
I just took it that he got the blessing
Yes.
and
Yep.
left.
It was cool. I was like,
he did his thing and then got out.
Yes.
Yeah.
With Hermes.
Yes. And
I really liked Hermes. I don't know why, but I did.
The whole final, like towards the end scene where I keep forgetting how to say her name. Sidnya?
Yeah.
Was like in that red room and she met I don't know if it's an AI. I think it's an AI or the person who was guarding the crystal with all the information at the end. Like more background history on that, or I just wanted more information about why her civilization matters to preserve in the first place, and have that again be more towards the beginning. Like maybe have Fall or another character learning about her civilization, and then he meets her. It's like, oh, we got to preserve this, because it just seemed like they were very much like, we're just meeting, but we're gonna sacrifice our lives for each other. But there wasn't enough like build up.
Do you know? I feel like we might have been spoiled, like as readers, purely because in sci-fi you get such a more organic introduction to how a world works if you have the plot device of a newbie, right? And Becky Chambers uses the newbie, right? And she uses it very well. And while that character is learning through others, we're learning secondhand through that experience they're having. But it felt like every single character knew exactly how this universe worked, knew exactly their place in it. So we didn't learn anything aside from context by a character's actions. But there was no conversation about how things work. But I feel like Becky Chambers might have spoiled us on that front.
I won't disagree there. Yeah.
It read like second game in a series. Like
yes. Yeah. It's read like a book too, 100%.
Yes.
Writing style wise though, it really read to me like I don't know if you've read anything by Kevin Anderson. It read like very early Kevin Anderson.
Okay. What has Kevin Anderson written?
He writes space opera. He writes the same thing, but it's like just the style it was written in stylistically was very, very similar. And I don't usually pick up on writing style, but I was reading it. I was like, oh, it kind of feels like Kev.
Yeah. And I don't think it feeling like a second book is necessarily a bad thing. Because sometimes I've read books like that as well, where I'm like, I feel like I missed something, but I know that this is like the first book. And so I'm not knocking them for that necessarily. But again, kind of like what we've talked about, if we just had a little extra information, whether that be in the form of a glossary or even an extra paragraph or something, it would have definitely bumped it up to 4 stars for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And I do want to clarify on my 2-star rating that like it wasn't bad.
Right.
It was just I was too to me 3 is like it was a decent book, and like I kind of know who I would recommend this to. But because I was so confused most of the time, I don't know like how to feel about it. So it's more based on like feeling. Like it's that for me. It's just
I kind of read it like a mystery. Like I was trying to figure out the world, and it was
See, that
like
makes sense.
just going
Oh, I should have
through
read it like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. If you go into it thinking like you're solving a mystery.
Yeah, that's how I should have read. That's interesting. I should have read it like that. Because I love mystery and thriller. They're like my favorites. So,
Like you said, though, I feel like I would know exactly who to recommend this to. This is a book where I could very easily be like, if you like this, you would like this. Because of the connections you can see in it to so many other kinds of things.
I agree.
is there anything else anyone wants to add? We're almost at like the hour mark, so that's pretty good. We've been able to make it this far. Anything else anyone wants to add? I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Oh, I was a little confused about the whole God speaking to God, that Tigger was speaking to his God. That part.
Yeah.
I completely forgot about it, so I flipped open to my note right now. Was that ever explained? Did the God exist? Is he schizophrenic? Like what?
There was one bit where it was a conversation with Sostek and Fall, I think, where Fall was like, oh, he talks to his god. And then Sostek says something like, he's not. He's talking to like the Colossus or something. And he mentions the word Colossus. So I'm like, I don't know if that's something that's going to be like expanded on in book 2. I have no idea.
Yeah, I didn't really pick up on that, but I am curious now about this Colossus thing, now that I'm like thinking back and I vaguely remember that mentioning. And so, yeah, that would be interesting to learn more about as well.
I just
And
thought
again,
it was,
maybe
like,
we'll get more explanation in everything in the next book. So maybe it's just a little bit of a harder introduction, but then it'll all make sense later on.
What were you gonna say, Mel?
Yes.
Oh, I thought it was just like he traveled to like some other world or like island or something, and that was where like the god or however they talked to them was there, and then he took over the power from the Harbinger or something like that. But I don't know.
That might make sense. I mean, there was a lot of portal world jumping, so I wouldn't be surprised. Dun, dun, dun.
How do you guys feel about the romance between Sidna and Fall?
Was there one?
They tried to.
Yeah.
I was confused because I'm like, is it there? Am I just reading too much into this?
I don't know.
Especially the bit where Sostek was like, I know that face.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I was like, especially like having given us all the hints that Fall was into Olivia as
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wasn't. They were trying to make some sort of like love triangle tension there, and I wasn't feeling it. No.
Right.
I mean, I didn't even like. I think everyone should have just stayed single. There didn't need to be a romance at all. But
get it out of here.
That's just how I feel.
Maybe one of them will die in future books, and they'll be crushed, and we'll be like, no.
Yes, plot twist.
Yeah.
I'm so here for that. But yeah, no, it's okay. But thank you so much to the authors for sending this to us in exchange for an honest review. And if anyone else who's watching this decides to read it and might have thought that it was hard sci-fi and might have been a little worried to get into it, it has a lot of fantastical elements. So hopefully you give it a try and see if that's something that you're into.
Yeah, definitely. If you're into fantasy and maybe are trying to explore sci-fi, this is a perfect starting off point for that. So I recommend it for that.
Also, if you like RPG video games.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, video games. Oh my goodness, yes.
And
I'm also excited just to see like what this author duo continues with. I am definitely going to read the other ones, hopefully, when they come out. Hopefully I'll figure out when they come out and things like that, just because they are an independent author, so it's going to be like Might be a little hard, but I'm gonna keep tracks on them for sure. I'm sure you guys will as well. So, yeah. Does anyone else have any closing remarks before we announce everything for next month?
I'm actually a fan of the authors. Oh, sorry, Mel. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You can go, Steph.
Well, I was just saying, like, I'm actually a little fan of the authors because I think they are so cute. Like, as a couple author duo, I don't think we have enough of those, or at least I haven't seen enough of those.
Right.
And that is a hashtag goal. Like, I want more of that. I think they're really cool, and I like that they are doing this aside from like their original job in the medical field, but you can also see some of that in the writing, which is nice. And so I will be looking out for more from them in the future. What are you going to say, Mom?
I was going to say, I'm looking out for more covers that they come up with because this is such a good cover.
It is a good cover.
It's so nice.
It's really nice. I've seen some independently published books with some really questionable covers. So, and usually like after the first couple, they figure out a flow and kind of understand trends. But for a first book, this is really well designed. So,
love it. All right. So for next month, we are going to be reading Leviathan Wakes, right? Yes, I'm not getting my months confused. Yes, that is correct. Which is super exciting. This is one, me personally, I have briefly heard about, but I'm not familiar with. So I'm personally excited for that. It seems like everyone else is too, based on the reactions. So super cool. I'm ready for that. It's going to be hosted on Melody's channel, correct? Yes. And I believe we are going to be having it on the last Sunday of the month, like we normally do, which will be May. Oh my gosh, May.
Right?
May 30th.
I think.
That is over Memorial Day weekend because May 31st will be Memorial Day, just so you guys are aware. But we'll still be here, same time, Melody's channel, end of the month. Yeah. Does anyone else have any closing remarks before we peace out for the day?
Nope. I think we're good.
All right.
I'm good.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to everyone that is around me. They're awesome creators and stuff. I'll be back with more videos soon. Yep, subscribe. Don't forget to like and share this video as well. And thank you guys so much for joining me on my channel. And for my normal closing, keep on gabbing.
Bye, guys.
Bye.